Welcome back to the All Outdoors Photography Podcast, where we share experiences out in the field and educate others through landscapes, wildlife, macro, and more, with photographers from around the world.
And today we have Josh Wiley on the show. He's an outdoor photographer from Eastern Ohio. So welcome, Josh.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and ask you, of course, yeah. I'm going to ask you a first question here. What fuels you to really be so prolific in your photography and sharing all things outdoor photography?
Well, I think there's always something to photograph. And I think that I don't want to judge other people, but I think that it's kind of it's not necessary to limit yourself to a particular genre. I try to carry a lot of lenses. I always try to have my macro with me. It's at least when it's not the middle of winter. I always try to have landscape lenses. I usually try to carry a filter set. And they're usually in the back of my car with me pretty much all the time. I think that there's always, if you think about it, there is always a good subject, every week of the year. And whether it's orchids in the middle of the summer after the spring ephemerals have gone, whether it's different birds that are in the middle of their breeding cycle during the summer months or during, outside of migration, whether it's, owls in the middle of, in the late winter in February or January, whether it's waterfalls, at different times of the year, when you have good flow or good fall color. So I've kind of gotten into photography in my middle 40s, after dabbling in it from time to time as a younger person, but not really seriously, just having a point and shoot, or maybe doing a little bit of astrophotography as a teenager, or doing some point and shoot maybe while traveling as a 30-something, but really in my 40s, I got several DSLRs, the whole suite of lenses, and kind of threw myself into it.
So you've always been on digital then? No film experience?
Film experience as a kid. I did astrophotography on like Konica 3200, the moon and the planets, and deep sky objects, that sort of thing. But really nothing since then.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about that? Wow, that age that made you just kind of go over the edge and start buying all that gear? What was the turning point for you?
Well, I had been doing a lot of hiking, and just spending a lot of time outdoors in my early 40s, from late 30s to early 40s, and it became the sort of thing where, I would want to spend my whole weekend, dragging my kids on hikes in rural Ohio, maybe in Pennsylvania or West Virginia, and I would take a lot of pictures with my iPhone, and people were like, "You should get a better camera." So eventually, in 2017, I ordered a little Olympus, and it worked okay. will always be kind of indebted to the Olympus system for kind of getting me into it. But then about 3 months later, I went and got a D500, and then eventually I graduated to full frame and a big prime lens. So I guess I've kind of moved from micro four thirds all the way up to full frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great though, because it just, changing camera systems is a little daunting, but I mean, if it's really what the gear you get most familiar with and what works for you in particular too.
I think the Olympus system is brilliant, especially in terms of the user interface and the menu system. But there's only so much you can do with a micro four thirds system in terms of noise, in terms of resolution, in terms of depth of field. So.
Mm-hmm. You just felt like it's better suited to what you're shooting at the time or are now?
Yeah, I mean, I still have all my micro four thirds gear. I can fit it in one bag. If I go back to Iceland at some point, which I do want to do, then I'll certainly take it with me because it will fit in one bag. It will always be there with me. I don't have to worry about, it being in 3 separate bags and travel with it. But for the most part, I'm using a D850 at this point with a Z9 on order, and there's just kind of the full suite of Nikon lenses.
Mm-hmm. Nice, yeah. So when you first got that little Olympus, what were you shooting at first? Was it birds or flowers or?
Well, I was going to take my kids on a 3-week trip out west, and this was really my first visit to Yellowstone, my first visit to the Badlands. I had been out to Colorado, as a kid a bunch, like maybe 3 or 4 times, and I was going to Yellowstone for the first time, and so I went ahead and ordered an Olympus, and it came just in time. And then we were off for 3 weeks, just running around, chasing landscapes and bison and pronghorn and that sort of thing.
It's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So a lot of your images though nowadays are taken here in Ohio. Now, what like scenic features or like what are you really looking at in this particular state besides it's being where you live right now, of course?
Well, I don't know. I think somebody once asked Jim McCormick if he was content to be in Ohio, and he was like, "Oh yes, it's a great place because it's an intersection of so many things," and I really agree. It is. It has a great variety of bird species, a great variety of flower species. It sits at the intersection of several different ecological and climatic zones. You have a bit of the Appalachians. You have a glaciated and unglaciated region. You have the lake. You've got the river. I don't want to. Well, I will make an argument that in some ways it's the best state. So I enjoy Ohio. I also go fairly far outside Ohio into. Typically for me, like about an 8 to 10 hour drive is the limit. But I like to go to the Upper Peninsula. I like to go to Cape May, New Jersey. I like to go to the Smokies a lot. So
nice. Yeah. So when you go there, are you like camping or do you stay in hotels or is it just a day trip?
Usually it's a weekend trip.
What do you do for that? Oh, nice.
So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you have a camper van or camping at all?
No, I'm typical. I'm not that ambitious. My mother, I think, did not help me to get really into the camping thing because I think as a child, the last time we went camping was with 3 boys, 2 of whom were in diapers in the rain when I was roughly 5 years old. I'm the oldest of 6. So we didn't repeat that very much when I was growing up. So I'm just trying to pick hotels in strategic spots and hit as many things as possible in a weekend, and then make it back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally understand that. I'm not a huge camper myself. And you're already spending tons of time outdoors, so all good there. So when you're going out shooting, I know you said you kind of started out hiking a lot. Are you still kind of integrating hiking, or do you just kind of have locations that you can just go to get like consistent shots?
No, actually the hiking in my degree of fitness have probably taken a real beating because of wanting to slow down and spend time on locations and spend time on subjects and just wait, be patient, be impatient, jump around too much. But yeah, it's not well integrated right now. It's something I kind of need to try to balance better.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, it is tough though with being outdoor photographers, because it's like it almost is like an endurance sport and like tests your physical limits in a way, because you are hiking sometimes many miles and over tops of like different terrain and stuff. So yeah, it can definitely take a toll on a person.
Yeah, I went to do Gregory Bald, and I tried getting partway up the trail last year, and then the weather turned bad, and I was like, well, I'll wait until they open the road from Cades Cove instead of trying to go up the backside from North Carolina, and So I don't do as much adventuresome hiking as I used to, but I'd like to get back into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess like photography is first and foremost kind of like why you're out there in a way then.
Yes. Usually just, chasing subjects, and usually to me, my goal really is to accomplish something photographically every weekend or on every trip. And to get, not necessarily a portfolio level image, but, something that where I learned from the experience, or where I'm able to see or do something new, or whether I'm able to have a failure that helps me to prepare better next time.
Mm-hmm. Do you plan each shoot when you go out, or do you just kind of let things happen?
I usually have an idea, and I'm usually open to opportunities. So I just like last weekend, for instance, I was at McGee Marsh on Friday. Things were good on the boardwalk a little bit Friday afternoon. I had my son along, who's 16 and nonverbal and autistic, and he did okay on the boardwalk for a little while. I did the wildlife drive a couple times, but then I was like, I really want to see more painted trillium, and it's everybody's shooting the same warblers. This is this sort of shared experience, but everybody's getting the same kinds of shots of the same kinds of birds, and so I left Lake Erie and went and drove down to Pocahontas County, West Virginia, and I found a bunch of painted trillium. My daughter was like, "Dad, these are the flowers you're looking for," and so we found those, we photographed those, and then we went to the Falls of Hills Creek, which is wonderful. If anybody hasn't been there, I really recommend it. The Lowest Falls is one of the best places, or one of the best waterfalls, I think, in the eastern U.S. for having that classical simplicity of a single big cascade, or a single big arcing, simple waterfall flow. And on my way back, I ran into like a trio of Canada warblers fighting and then chasing each other all around on this kind of elevated boardwalk stairway right on the side of this ridge, as part of the hike. And I was able to get a bunch of nice shots of Canadas. So, that wasn't planned at all, but that ended up being kind of the highlight of the weekend, so to speak.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really good. And it's cool because, like, you're just saying, like, the shots of, like, at McGee, for example, that's like a shared experience. But, the Tree of Canada, it's a pretty unique experience. I bet no one else is going to get shots like that, of course.
Well, there are, that part of West Virginia is a good location for late spring, early summer warblers. I've gotten some nice shots there, and I didn't expect to find the Canadas, but I think, you have to be open to that. As I was photographing the painted trillium, I had a Blackburnian singing like right over my head really loud. And I couldn't I got like one or two looks at him, but I couldn't get a clear shot or anything. He was up in this pine tree, but it was, it's a good location because you get part of Canada, really, part of the boreal forest down and buried in this little pocket of the Appalachians.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Typical of warblers, though, to be up that high, at least a lot of them, that is. But I know early on, it's like, for me, it was like always, I just kind of like went out and shot whatever I saw. Like if I wanted to see some birds, I just go out to like some woods and like just whatever I may find. I did have no forethought of like what I might see or plan it out. So how was it like early on with you? Did you just kind of go out to say, I'm going to photograph birds today and just see what happens? Like how was that early on for you?
Well, early on, I would always try to be carrying, several different lenses, and I would swap them out a bit, and then I would get dust spots on my sensor and things like that from swapping them out too much. But just always be prepared to experience something to be ready to switch it up. if the opportunity strikes, whether you're in the woods looking for wildflowers or warblers, but a landscape opportunity really presents itself because the light's falling on the ferns in a particular way, or you have a river scene that you can do. Just always kind of be open to that from my perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Or even combining the several different factors. Like I know you have an image that should be on the slideshow here of I think it's a lady slipper, it looks like, and it has like the sunburst behind it from like I'm guessing at late morning or sunset.
Yeah, that's
like,
that's
really
actually
cool.
one of my favorite images. That was last June. I was in the Upper Peninsula with sunset, and this is shot with a 14 millimeter wide angle lens, and or a 14 to 24 wide angle with a full frame body. And I went very wide because I wanted to be able to get the sunburst, and I went out to f/22, went wide, got the sunburst, got several different orchids. I think there were really a total of like 3 or 4 orchids in this picture, but I can really only see 2 image scale. But yeah, it was. I was doing macro up until then, but then the opportunity presents itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's try.
Do you research habitats at all for these plants? Like, will you?
Oh yes.
Kind of try to figure out what kind of.
It's hard.
So you do a lot of background research.
Yeah. So with birds, we're blessed with eBird, which when people first learn about eBird, I think some people are kind of like, this is horrible because the birds don't get any privacy.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that unless it's a suppressed or late report, time shifted record, that such and such is here. With plants, it's much more difficult because there's not that sort of resource. You can use iNaturalist, and it will give some of that sort of data, and it probably shouldn't, frankly. I mean, the problem is the plants can't move, so they tended to get dug up by people who want to garden, and
oh geez,
especially the orchids. People are. The people were always trying, I think, to dig up orchids in different places, and it almost never works, and it's highly advised against because it's fundamentally killing the plants. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like this, especially like something like an orchid is so specialized to its environment and climate. It's like I don't feel like people realize when you take it out of that environment, it's simply not going to survive in much the same way too.
Yeah, at least not the North American orchids. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So with spring being on its way out for the year, like what's been your process with capturing like spring wildflowers? Because I do lots of ephemerals as well, and they're one of my favorite subjects to shoot. So what's like your process with capturing those?
Well, yeah, I want to find a location. I want to watch the weather a lot. I'll move around a lot based on the weather. Ideally, I want some cloudy skies, maybe a little bit of sun, but not a ceiling and visibility unlimited day at all. And no wind or as little wind as possible. Raindrops are nice, but you don't usually get those. And then just try to hit a series of locations. Try to hit locations again because you can watch the progression. Like Ohio River Bluffs is a favorite place of mine. It's an Arc of Appalachia preserve outside of Manchester, Ohio, and it's a sort of place where you can go back, once a week for 6 weeks and see the whole progression. I haven't made it back that many times, but 3 or 4 times in a season, you can see the progression. You can see where the trout lilies come up, and you can see where the trilliums start and where they end, and where some of the other spring ephemerals pop. So things like that I think are good. I think it really does pay to go back to locations, because you see more things. You have a better perspective about your opportunities. You can experiment more. So that's mostly my process. Usually take a couple lenses, of course. And lately I've been trying, I got the sit-centered f4, and it really did help my bird photography a lot because of just the depth of field and the additional, shutter speed that you can do. But I've also tried using it for wildflowers, and it actually works. Like if you can get the right angle, I mean, it does really well in terms of isolating the subject with wildflowers at like f4 from 15, 20 feet.
So yeah, I'm curious with that. Like, is it almost too far back to be manageable every time, or most of the time does it work out?
It's kind of an alternative to using a macro, but sometimes it does work, and sometimes you can get a different perspective, especially with wildflowers. I think you have to be careful that you don't end up trampling all over the place. I mean, I've not always been the best person in terms of staying exactly on the trail, and I see something off the trail, and it's like, how do I get there without scarring the slope and slipping all over the place? And so it's helpful with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can only imagine with that focal length. It's just like, how do you even get that unless if it's like straight down the trail or something off to the side? Yeah.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do at, say, 105 millimeters. So.
Yeah, is it birds or something? Yeah. That's really cool, though. Yeah. So, like, what are your favorite like wildflowers to shoot in particular? Do you have any like favorites?
Oh, I love the different trillium species. I love the orchids. I love both the lady slippers and the plantanthera, or the bog orchids that we get during the whole summer, really. So, I mean, those are, and just all the other spring ephemerals, really.
Yeah, all good choices too, because it's like there's many especially like the trilliums. There's like, I think 6 of them here in the state of Ohio. It's like,
yeah, and then there's a couple more species that are in other places in the Appalachians and kind of the Mid-Atlantic. So,
yeah, this is like cool because it's like just like a checklist of like how many different kinds can you see depending on the month or the habitats, and of course too. Yeah,
and then the summer wildflowers are really nice too. I mean, you gentlemen or Ryan, you're at least close to Huffman Prairie, and that's 20 minutes. That's an absolute treasure. I try to go there a lot during the summer. That and other places like that, but that's really the best place in Ohio for the sort of community you have there.
Yeah, I mean,
it's definitely on my list for sure.
Yeah, I've been hyping up Henry about that location in particular because it's just for not only birds all year, but yeah, the wildflower display in like mid-July is like perfect. I mean, that prairie is just on fire with color, and of course that attracts the hummingbirds too. And it's just, yeah, it's such a beautiful place all times of year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, tell us more about like your workflow when it comes to like exploring location. Like, how many hours on it like do you spend out in the field, would you say, on a typical day?
Oh, I probably don't spend enough time at individual locations. I'm usually trying to pack like 3 to 4 different things in a day. I probably should slow down more, but I'm researching things and trying to make sure that I have several different options with several different things to get, maybe depending on the light and depending on what can I kind of squeeze into the day as a whole. It all depends.
It goes both ways.
A place like Cades Cove is a place where you just want to spend a lot of time, and you want to go back to it, and then you want to eventually spend more time out of your car, like away from your car, away from the people, like in the woods, and there's another whole range of destinations where it's like if I'm looking for an orchid, it's going to be on this road, and it's going to be a roadside thing. I'm going to find it, then I'm going to go, an hour or 30 minutes to another location, I'm going to find a different orchid roadside, and so forth. So.
And do you have that knowledge from years past, or do you just are you searching for those?
I'm searching for those. I'm chatting with people on Facebook. I'm using eBird. I'm using iNaturalist. I'm using, if you Google hard, you can find out most things, especially if you get old reports, that are maybe published for state agencies or for federal agencies that, may describe the conservation of a particular species. And it's the sort of information that, maybe somebody would be afraid to put in print today, but if you can find an old PDF, it may tell you a lot of things. So that, and just, I guess, meeting other people in the field and, doing small talk and trying to get a sense of tips and leads, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's like one of the best ways to go about it. And you're pulling in all these different resources, both online and in person. So it definitely captures the history and also sort of like the present day with it too. And helps you see basically more subjects and get better photographs that way too.
Yeah. And then, sometimes you come across stuff that's completely unexpected. In my portfolio, I have a picture of a gyrfalcon. And I went to Iceland in 2018 for like a 2-week road tour. And I didn't really want to tell anybody that I was also looking for gyrfalcons, but because I didn't want to come away empty-handed. But I was just in the middle of nowhere, and I was driving along to this gannet colony that I wanted to see on the very north slope, or on the very north coast of Iceland. And I was driving along, and maybe 3 miles away from the gannet colony, and I come around a corner, and there's like 2 gyrfalcons right beside the road on a rock, like, wow. That was, that's kind of iconic, I think, of, you're looking for something in general, you're in the right habitat, you have no idea if you're going to run into anything, and you've got specific destinations that you're actually going to, and the search and find is sort of like icing on the cake.
I gotta follow you around sometime. Seems like you have a good luck mark or something. Yeah.
But then I went back for a couple days. On that particular trip, I went back for a couple days, and I observed the second day. I think I got this nice close pass, and saw a bunch of competitive behavior with the youngsters. The third day I went back, and the what appeared to be the fledglings weren't there. It was just one adult, but he or she was up on a rock and flew over the landscape, and so I mean it's, if you put yourself in the right position, the right location, you're bound to see stuff. You just, I think, need to be educated. Need to be open to opportunities, need to be intellectually, emotionally, spatially curious,
Yeah, and a bit of persistence too, just to show up again and again if it doesn't work out the first time or the 10th time, and you may eventually get that shot, hopefully, too.
Yeah, then you miss stuff. I mean, I frequently travel with small children. Well, they aren't so small anymore. One's 11 and one's 16. And they're sort of like Dad, But I remember I was out west, and I got them up like 2 mornings in a row to hit Lamar Valley before dawn. And they were real troopers. They were happy to come along, and we ate some stuff in the car, and we were in position watching grizzly bears across the valley, that sort of thing. And then the third day, I let them sleep in the third day, and that was a day that the wolf pack walked through the valley and right in front of all the photographers. It was,
oh my gosh.
It was like I think I showed up 10 minutes after they vanished, so well after sunrise. So
I'm curious now,
that's how it always goes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, always is. Yeah, I'm curious though. Is like, how's it been with traveling with your kids? Like, yeah, are they troopers all the way? Is it kind of like, do they go like, Dad, can we give up and go home? I mean, like, how's it been with them? Are they cooperative for the most part?
It's still something I'm trying to work through, and I I like taking them out. I did do some of this alone. I'm doing the shared parenting thing with their mother, and so I traditionally, I would get, a free weekend. I could travel by myself or with a friend somewhere, and then I would traditionally then, you know, take them on something or maybe do something closer to home in Ohio. So they've seen a lot, and they've been.
Yeah, more than probably any other kids, honestly, and probably
yeah.
no school or anything. I mean, it's a great experience
for the age group. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so
have they taken up a love for photography or anything?
Not.
Or just
my daughter has dabbled in it a little bit, but not much. Not yet.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Do you let her borrow the camera, or is it just more like phone photos or something like that?
I've let her borrow my smaller Olympus from time to time, but she hasn't. I don't know. It hasn't really taken. I should see what I can do there. But yeah.
Yeah, shoot on full auto, basically.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so maybe shifting gears here back to the bird stuff. So a lot of birds is like a big part of your portfolio. Where did your passion come from, like shooting these? Is it just from like your hikes and seeing them a lot? Or is it something else?
Well, what is it? Is there a natural progression? I mean, owls are absolutely wonderful. And I mean, owls and bears are probably still my favorite subjects. But many people, I kind of started out with raptors. I think the first fall I got into this, I went to Cape May maybe 4 times to stand on the platform and watch the migration. I went to Hawk Mountain maybe 2 or 3 times that summer, or I'm sorry, that fall. And I don't do that quite as much now. The warbler migration is probably in the fall is probably more important to me than the raptor migration. And really, I mean, despite the fact that I have a lot of birds in my work, I really prefer to shoot mammals. It's just hard. I mean, there's nothing quite like being away from your car and having a bear like with you, and you're going to respect the bear, and you're not going to get too close to him or her. And he knows exactly where you are, and he's going about his business, and and there's this sort of coexistence. That those are special moments to me, and or being in the woods and there's an elk, and you're actually too close to the elk, and you need to back up, and you need to be careful. I would prefer to shoot mammals when I get the opportunity, but they're pretty rare as subjects in this part of the country. So,
is that why you get to Cades Cove a lot for the black bears there?
It's wonderful, but there's so many people in Cades Cove. That's one of the problems. It's just Alligator River is a really nice location too, and the black bears are really big and fat, like really big. That's in North Carolina near the Outer Banks.
Oh, cool.
I like to go to both locations, and I don't really have a third bear location, really. I mean, occasionally you see them in West Virginia, but black bears I really do love. I don't think people should be afraid of black bears, really. I mean, grizzlies are another matter, but I mean, they're kind of like these big omnivorous dogs. They mostly are interested in eating nuts and fruits, and they're either going to be afraid of you or they're going to respect you. So it's your job to make sure.
I think it's
that they're
it's
not
important
that you don't discomfort them or make them feel uncomfortable.
for sure.
Definitely.
I think it's great you're talking about that too, because I think photographers have a unique position, maybe even versus hunters on bears, just kind of tell the community.
Oh
truth
yeah,
about
I mean the black
them.
bear is a really special
Yeah.
animal. It is in our North American ecosystems kind of like the analog of the gorilla. It eats a very wide range of
Yeah.
things. It has, these immense sensory characteristics, these immense sensory abilities where it can smell things from a really long way away. They have a complex social structure. They're arboreal. They sleep in trees. They climb trees. But they fulfill many of the sort of the niche of a large primate in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And
the
Indians thought about it that way too. The Native Americans are first peoples. They thought about it, and as the black bear was like the wild man of the woods. So.
That's a great analogy or way to put it. Yeah, I never really thought about that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I also like to shoot waterfalls, and I'm trying to get better at shooting fall color. I don't I don't know if I quite have the touch, but when I can do landscape, I do try to. It's definitely more challenging than anything else, and with the flowers, you get a sense of landscape because you can practice composition in a way that you never would with a warbler, for instance, or a bear, really.
So what do you struggle with landscapes? Is it that composition like you mentioned?
Well, finding the subject. I mean, you can shoot the subject that everybody else has shot. I've shot Upper Falls and the Hocking Hills, I don't know, maybe 100 times. But it's fine, going out and finding a landscape that's not, that's not on Instagram, that's not, that's new, that's different, that's a different look. That's very challenging. It forces you to think differently about everything. So.
Yeah, maybe that's part of the challenge in a way too, because it does feel like landscape photography is more or less kind of like everyone's kind of shot everything, which I wouldn't say is entirely true, but it does kind of feel like that way, sometimes, or depends on where you're at too, of course.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there any landscape shots that you would try out maybe, or something that maybe might set it apart from that?
Well, landscape is, for me, it's usually challenging because I'm usually with people who don't want to get up early enough or who don't want to stay out late enough. And so it's, chasing not just, the subjects at the time of day, but it's chasing the light and chasing the opportunity. And, usually I end up coming up kind of, not quite with what I was looking for, but, it's it's a challenge, and it's one of the things that I do enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Is there any favorite stories from out in the field that you have, just in general from hiking and photography?
Favorite stories. I spent a lot of time photographing stuff from a car and waiting in a car, and lately I've been, especially with bears, or with elk, I've been I really have to get into position. I have to get out. I have to get away from other people. I need to be a participant in the ecosystem, at least as a visitor and not just as a tourist. And so I've been trying to do that more. I guess I've also been trying to go back to locations, but I've also tried to in looking for, well, I will tell a story about looking for orchids. I was chasing a particular orchid species in Pocahontas County, West Virginia, and maybe 2 years before, I had met this guy photographing a black-burning warbler in the parking lot of Cranberry Glades, and he introduced himself. He had some curious tattoos on his arms of flowers and birds and things like that. And he was a school teacher, Scott Shriver from from Pittsburgh, a retired school teacher, I think then. And he told us about this orchid that he had found and named after his dad. And I got some really nice shots of the black burning that they were photographing, and kind of thanked them for pointing it out. And then 2 years later, I'm in a similar place a couple miles away, and I'm looking for a different orchid, and I find the Shriver's orchid, and kind of unlooked for, and went back and photographed that population a couple times as it kind of went through its cycle, and that was kind of special to me. So I'm doing that sort of thing where I'm, trying to explore locations and trying to see what nature presents.
It's awesome. Yeah, and also people, seeing what people show up as well.
Oh, yes.
Do you shoot with other people a lot?
Not as much as I should. No, I've not as much as I should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think it's just because of kind of, the distance of locations you go to, just kind of the variety there?
Well, I'm also, when I'm with my son, which is often now, I'm trying to kind of bring him along and keep him happy. And he is an autistic nonverbal kid who's bigger than I am. And he likes being outside, and it's good for him. But he doesn't always understand why we're still on this back road, trying to photograph this flower, or why we're waiting for this bear to get done feeding and to stand up, or, turn its head so Dad can get a shot. So
for sure.
That's limited me a bit, but that won't always be quite that way. So I do enjoy being around other people, but I mostly just enjoy being on the quest, so to speak, and that's often alone or just with my kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so great that you can have them tag along too, and kind of like share the experience together, and that they enjoy it too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, like, when it comes down to like editing and post processing, what kind of software do you use or recommend?
Yeah. So, I was thinking about this as I was preparing for to be interviewed here. I went through and tried to do something of a portfolio. I have about 500,000 images still in my Lightroom catalog. It's kind of ridiculous. I think I've shot like probably 2 million or so, but I've deleted a bunch, but I haven't deleted enough, so, and I need to stop taking so many, but that's, so I'm doing it mostly in Lightroom. I'm mostly applying, kind of a common style preset, adjusting that up a little bit, setting the white points and the black points. I don't do that much dodging and burning at all. Occasionally I'll brighten, or, if it's really like the face is in too much shadow or something like that, or some key part of an orchid is in too much shadow, I might brighten it a little bit. I use vignetting a lot. And lately I've been really challenged to play with color cast, and, to adjust the hues a little bit channel by channel, especially for bears. A friend of mine whom I had never met, but who has given me a lot of advice through Instagram, Kelly Sharp, One Lane Road Photography. She was like, I hate to be difficult, but on your bears, if you just pull the blue channel down, you'll be so much happier, And I'm like, you're
Oh,
right.
for sure.
You know, I mean, you
Yeah.
have to be. You want it to be. You don't want it to be real warm, but you want to pull the blue channel down. You know, so
Uh-huh.
that makes kind of all the difference in the world, because you can still have that, you know, that fairly cool green around the bear without the bear looking like it's, you know, a different species, the blue species of black bear as opposed to, or the blue subspecies of black bear as opposed to the black subspecies of black bear. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm dumb. Is there actually a more bluish species of black bear?
oh yes, there is. I think it lives
Really?
up in Alaska, or it lives up
Oh,
on
wow.
in the you know, in British Columbia. There's a couple different species.
So
I mean, there's
that's
a couple
that's
different or
fascinating.
subspecies of color morphs. You know, the spirit bear in British Columbia is famous, but I think that's a pretty small population.
Yeah.
The blue bears are kind of the same. They're in, I think, a little bit north of there, but the same sort of thing where it's a blue morph.
Wow, I had no idea. Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
educating me there.
Same here. Yeah. That's the stuff you learn with time, though, I guess, or people like that helping you out with, you know, editing and just learning about the species in general too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
with those bears, what's kind of the distance you like to maintain? Say you're not in your car and photographing it. What's the distance you like to stay at?
Well, I've been pretty close, but you know that's
Uh-huh.
not ideal, and that's usually but completely by accident. You know, it's
Yeah.
if you have a like a 600 f4, you can stay pretty far away. If you're
Uh-huh.
down to like a 270 180, I'm sorry, not a 270 180, 70 to 200. Uh, you know, f2.8, that's a nice lens, but you have to be pretty close, and that's the
Yeah.
lens I think a lot of people like to use, but you almost never get the opportunity to use it, you know. So
Uh,
you know, the bears aren't coming to weddings, so to speak.
yeah, for sure.
So for me, yeah, I mean, if it's I mean, within the national parks, you're not supposed to be closer than 50 yards. I
Uh-huh.
think that's rarely enforced, especially in roadside
Yeah.
situations where the rangers are kind of managing the contact anyways. But you know, in general, you want
Yeah, and
to,
as far as I know, there too, if it walks up on you,
right,
it's the rule kind of goes out the window too,
right,
because there's really nothing you could do. So
right. Well, those rules exist to keep people from harassing the bears, which, you know,
exactly.
and I mean, the world has changed so much. You talk to old timers in the Smokies, and they're like, "Well, when we were kids, we used to come up here with bread, with jam and butter, and
Oh
feed
no.
the bears."
Oh
And it was
God.
like,
Wow.
no, but this is what people did in like the 40s or 50s. I mean, it was just, we didn't think anything of it.
Uh-huh.
So
Yep.
Wow.
No, my grandpa used to go to trash dumps. He lived in Michigan, and they would every night the black bears would come in and they'd feed them and watch them go through the trash. It was like a nightly thing.
well, in Yellowstone, they used to
Yeah,
have
it sounds weird,
grandstands.
but
You know, they used
A
to have
little bit.
grandstands and bring out the trash, and people would sit in the grandstands and watch the bears eat the trash. And I think this was around Mammoth or
yeah,
something. Yeah, it was like,
that actually sounds like one of the more safer methods from what we've heard. So
yeah.
Yeah. At least you're it's
Yeah.
probably about 50 yards or
Uh-huh.
so, right? At enough distance for. Yeah. Yeah. So how much of like ethics is really incorporated into like your photography? Like you mentioned about trying not to trample over wildflowers or, you know, just being close to bears, but like how much of that or even like conservation goes into your photography?
How should I put this? I mean, if I don't think that a website that's titled "The Unethical Photographer" would sell prints very well. You know,
Right.
I do try to be mindful. You know, I mean, I don't know. Is there like, should we talk about calling? um, I think more photographers call birds than we're prepared to admit. I have
Uh-huh.
sometimes.
Mhm.
Uh, it's there seems to be kind of a don't ask, don't tell sort of mentality about it. It is very counterproductive at a certain point, because you'll induce, the bird to be agitated, and it's pretty obvious, and you're not going to get shots. I mean, anyways, with wildflowers, most of these wildflowers are in pretty fragile habitats, and you don't want to trample. You don't want to start damaging the environment. The in situ conditions, which are essential to them flourishing.
Yep.
I think with a lot of orchids, a lot of these orchids are roadside, and they're kind of in the middle of nowhere, and they're kind of in these kind of hardy environments where they're summer weeds for all intents and purposes, and you can, I don't want to say you can get away with a lot, but they're not they frequently aren't nearly as fragile. I'm not above doing a little bit of field photoshopping, so to speak, in the sense of if there's a stray stem, if there's a stray leaf, if there's some other foliage in the picture, I'm going to try to move it out of the way. I mean, I try to present something that's naturalistic, that's true to nature, that leaves it that's the same as I found it. So does that help?
It definitely.
Yeah.
I think that there's also human beings
reasonable.
are a part of are a part of the ecosystem too, and there's a wonderful BBC documentary, The Human Planet, which which kind of corrects the perception that you might get from watching Planet Earth or The Blue Planet, where human beings don't appear at all, for hours and hours and hours. And
that's true.
And there is a sense in which sometimes there's opportunities, like you get. It's not in my portfolio collection, but I remember being at Babcock State Park at the Glade Creek Grist Mill, which is a human structure to begin with. And having a whole bunch of photographers in the frame, and you're waiting for hours, and they're just not moving, and they're it's a lost cause. And if you use the right shutter speed and the right blending, you can get you can just capture the people who are trying to experience the landscape too. And there is a human landscape element. There is a human there is a human touch on pretty much all of these things.
Yep.
I'm in Shawnee State Forest earlier this month, and I'm realizing, well, there's a lot of logging that's going on here, but there wouldn't be a prairie warbler in this environment beside the road, in the shrubbery, in my face, if it weren't for the fact that human beings are timbering the area from time to time. It would just be ceruleans, it would just be Blackburnians. A lot of the orchids do thrive in areas of human disturbance, and or areas that have been mown from time to time, or that have been burned from time to time. So we're a part of the ecosystem too. We're part of the experience of life here in North America, and I don't think we should. I think sometimes there's a little bit of too much of a nature pure of human contact, and in reality, a lot of species positively thrive with some human contact. I work in Coshocton, Ohio. I live in Muskingum County, east of Columbus. And in Coshocton, we have a peregrine falcon pair that come, and it's the winter here every winter. And you can see, you almost never see the male, but you see the female almost every day during the winter. And the situation is repeated in a bunch of county seats in Ohio, where these peregrines, they like the courthouses. They like these small towns with these courthouses that provide kind of like a fake cliff, so to speak. And they really like those ecosystems, and they like the fact that there's all these pigeons in these ecosystems, that there's all these starlings in these ecosystems, and they can eat them, and they. So oh, wow. I mean, there's,
getting rid of the invasive species too.
Yeah. So
yeah.
It's a sort of thing where, we wouldn't have absent. I mean, that is a totally man-made, phenomenon, so to speak, and that there's nothing ultimately wrong with that. I mean, if we can coexist with the birds, as much as possible, if we can coexist with the flowers as much as possible, that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a good way to put it. Yeah, it's just kind of like the cause and effect of things, but it can kind of turn out for the better depending on the relationship of everything too.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. So as we wrap up the episode here, Josh, is there any shout-outs you want to give, or dream locations? Do you have any upcoming trips planned, and any closing thoughts?
Well, I'm chasing orchids this summer, and I'm really looking forward to getting back to Huffman Prairie, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more bears. In terms of shout-outs, I would again shout out Kelly Sharp, One Lane Road Photography on Instagram. I really love her Tennessee.
We'll put her link down below for sure.
Yeah, she's wonderful, and is a real character. And her posts are wonderful because she tells you a lot about the environment, and she tells you a lot about life in general.
Got it.
I've learned a lot from a particular Cleveland photographer, a friend of mine, Ken Bush, and I guess in some circles maybe he's a little bit controversial, but he has a genius, I think, for captioning and for being persistent about subjects, especially, or mostly all birds, but a few landscape and other subjects. And I've really learned a lot from him. And I'd also shout out Catherine Kubert. She's Columbus-based, and she's taught me a lot about flower photography and wildflowers in general, and I really appreciate that.
That's great. Awesome.
Yeah. So, and then as far as you, like, where's the best place for everybody to view your work?
Okay. Yeah, I'm at Instagram under Joshua Wiley Images, and I used to be under Big R Romantic, which meant like capital R 19th century romantic, but it didn't that was too hard to explain, so I went back. I after considering different brand names, I was like, my brother Samuel was like, well, with photography, it's not like you're selling multiples or you're trying to promote multiple things. You're just promoting one thing yourself, really. So people wanted to connect with the photographer, so you should just use your own name. So that's what I did. Mm-hmm. And I have a website, and I need to do more work to develop it in terms of portfolioizing it and making it something that's appropriately curated. And that's JoshuaWileyImages.com.
Awesome.
Yeah,
well, thanks for coming on tonight.
Absolutely. I really
thank you, Josh.
It. And I appreciate I appreciate both of your gentlemen's work, and it's a wonderful experience to participate in podcasts like this and to listen to the content that you gentlemen put out.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Yeah. We like your photography as well. It's always great seeing your images and just learning about plant and bird species, and I do from each image too. Thank you so much for watching the All Outdoors Photography Podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and the video version on YouTube as well. You can subscribe down below, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.